And I'll do more. If it doesn't sound good, we'll just do another
I,
take
I
later.
actually wait, can you record it now and then do the intro and then pod? That way the vibes are we have the energy.
But okay, sure. Hi guys. Before we get started, we want to ask you a small favor that will help us tremendously. Over 35% of our newer subscribers haven't yet hit that subscriber button.
It's not subscribers, viewers. You're like, our subscribers are not subscribing. You gotta say our viewers are not subscribing.
Yes, you're right.
Justin, it might be easier to like just do this afterwards on your own time.
Give me one last try.
We have the pressure of three of us. Okay.
One last try.
Yeah. Hi guys. Before we get started, we wanted to ask you a small favor that will help us tremendously. Over 35% of our newer viewers haven't yet hit that subscribe button. Having more subscribers helps us get top guests on the show. We don't run ads and we don't have sponsorships, we just do this for fun. If you could help us by subscribing, that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Nice.
It's okay.
That was good.
Jordan, you can't even keep a straight face.
I mean, the delivery was fine. It's just the...
All right.
Welcome everybody to Steady Lads. It's yet another exciting week. Unfortunately, I would take a quiet one, but we have Huss with us this week to, help us navigate the markets a little bit. They've been extremely choppy all summer, I guess, as was kind of expected. Maybe let's start with some charts, Justin, to show a little bit what's been going on. Oh, you want to start with ETH BTC, straight to the blood? Okay, fine. This is
painful.
0.042. So we're hitting multi-year lows here. And I have to say, like, sentiment on crypto Twitter, on Ethereum over the last week, and since our last episode with Kane, has really reached the abyss. I have never seen it like this.
Yeah, I want to ask, like, Jordy and Huss, can capitulation be like a slow bleed like this, or does it really have to be like a sudden drop at some point? Like, feels like we've capitulated slowly over so long that it doesn't really feel real, right? Like there hasn't been any resolution to this pain.
Well, it'll be slow. It's not going to be like Luna because the inherent asset is not broken. It's stable. It's gonna, if anything, just take slow moves up and down. But yeah, Huss, you were telling us you kind of see like trends working on a longer time frame rather than a short time frame. How are you seeing trends on Ethereum?
Things take time to precipitate. I think Ethereum is a really interesting case because it is an instrument that is very heavily hedged, right? And I think that depends in part on two things. The first is the type of participants. People that tend to invest in Ethereum tend to be more institutional, right? Whether it's VC funds, whether it's other types of more speculative funds, but it's not as retail heavy as other tokens. And the other thing is the types of products you also have available for something like ETH, right? If you look at the options, if you look at even the perps, it's a way more liquid market compared to something like Solana or any other coin really other than Bitcoin, right? And so for that reason, like you tend to see more mature price action when it comes to ETH, and maturity usually takes time to precipitate, right? Like ETH trades more similar to a commodity than a shitcoin, I would say. But what's really interesting is it tends to be like that on the way down. On the way up, it tends to be more aggressive. And people think that that's like a sign of strength, but in my opinion, it probably isn't, right? If you have like a coin where you have all these like really, really strong rallies that quickly fizzle, right? And they take a long time to fizzle. But the point is, they almost always do. That to me signifies an asset that is like pretty heavy in supply, pretty heavily hedged as well, right? And it just seems like pretty oversaturated. Like for me, the bullish case for ETH would be a positioning reset or a flush, right? Or you just need like a really, really long lull where price doesn't do anything and people start capitulating. And people talk about like max pain scenarios. For me in crypto, max pain is always when things take a lot of time to precipitate, right? Because people in this market don't really have patience. People in this market are over leveraged. And it's also a market where price sort of impacts sentiment a lot, right? Like if you look at the ETH BTC chart, you have a chart that's been going down for months and months. all of a sudden you have a week where it could go up 10%. Sentiment changes extremely quickly, right? And so for that reason, I would say max pain scenario is always slow bleeding crypto, right? It's not actually a rug. Yeah.
I mean, like zooming out, the one striking thing I saw was that 12 months to 12 months, Bitcoin, I think, is from 29K to 58K. So it's doubled. And I think Ethereum, it's up from like 1800 to 24. It's up, 1.3. So quite a drastic, like you said, it's been a year-long thing. And there's a lot of pent-up questioning that is happening now because you can no longer call it a short-term deviation. There seems to be a larger reason to play. And if it was just Bitcoin, I think that would be fine. I think the fact that you have Solana on the other side, kind of sandwiching and showing that it is possible for an alt to do as well as Bitcoin, has created a narrative confusion. And what we saw this week, I think, on crypto Twitter was a lot of people hoping for a leader to emerge and coordinate the troops and for Vitalik to be that leader. You've seen Vitalik's posts, like maybe we can bring some of them up. He's given a half-hearted kind of support for DeFi while, encouraging other types of activity and being met with mixed reactions. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, last week when Kane was on the show, Kane said he was really happy to see that Vitalik had posted this like picture of a bull with a necklace that said ETH is good. For me, I said it was little too late, and I still hold that to be true. But I think the conversation has changed a ton over the last week. I think half of that is because of our episode with Kane. I think that woke a lot of people up. That episode had many more viewers than we normally get across all platforms, a ton of engagement on Twitter. And then on top of that, the episode with Bankless and Kyle Samani dropped, and Bankless received a lot of, in part pushback for like bringing on this Solana guy to talk about and shit on ETH. And then they also received support for like showcasing the other viewpoint. So I think what we've seen from Vitalik is too little too late. I do agree there's a problem, Jordy, where there's no cheerleader, there's no guiding voice, there's no leader in the Ethereum community right now. I think Bankless has in some ways been like pushed out of that role based on community feedback. And I think this lack of coordination is definitely a big problem for the chain. But I do agree, like the first step is recognizing the problem. And I think this past week has been really good, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of people come out and say, like, how can Vitalik not be supporting the best apps in our ecosystem? That doesn't make sense. How can he not be supporting the Ethereum vision publicly? So hopefully this is the start of something new.
Yeah, and I have this tweet pulled from Vitalik. I think he's kind of walking back his comments on, wanting to see other things, like things other than DeFi. He says that, the existence of the DeFi market is mostly a downstream of the ETH market, which means that while DeFi may be great, it's fundamentally capped and it can't be the thing that brings crypto to, a 10 to 100x adoption cycle. And I don't disagree with them, but I think the people are just upset, partly because I think ETH is going down, right? If ETH was going up, then no one really would care. But I do think that, if DeFi has been the thing that's been propping up ETH and like the value, right, of ETH, then it makes no sense to at least not support it.
As I have to disagree with this take. I'm going to leave the tweet up for another few seconds just to talk about it. I think, from my understanding, the move from proof of work to proof of stake was so that we could get this greater security benefit and that we could have more security than the actual valuation of the network, right? Now we have like a social consensus layer that's not dependent on miners, and we can slash if we need to slash. We have this whole new tool to protect and contain more value. So DeFi is not at all capped by the market cap of ETH, right? We can actually have more value on the chain secured than the value of ETH as an asset. Of course, the more value we secure, ETH will go up. But like we could have $1 trillion on chain right now, which is higher than the market cap of ETH, and protect that value. And that would obviously like exponentially increase DeFi's potential upside. So this tweet confused me. I didn't understand it. Maybe I'm understanding the problem completely differently.
Yeah, I don't think you're under. I think he's talking about something else entirely, which is just like these yield games, and he's saying like, where does the yield come from, and if it's coming from these endogenous things like leveraging ETH, like Ethena type of things, like basis trades and stuff like this. He's
but
saying
that's not what the conversation is. That's where the market is today, and you have to foster that market if you want to get to a great real world asset economy on chain, other types of assets. Like this is step one, and we can't just try to bypass it.
Well, that's obviously like some of the reaction. I mean, Huss, you're from the TradFi world. You know that world very well, and maybe you understand like the first principles things that Vitalik is trying to say about, like the self-referential Ouroboros, this fancy word of it's basically like a snake eating itself. What do you make of what's happening here?
I mean, it's really interesting because on one hand, it is fundamentally what makes ETH a sort of unique asset, right? On the other hand, it can also sort of give it a bad rep because a lot of these yield products nobody really understands. A lot of them blow up, right? A lot of them are also structured as literal Ponzi's, and it's just become like a new sort of game now where every day you have like a new fucking stablecoin that's performing some sort of carry trade on ETH, right? And it's like the next big thing. And this keeps happening in crypto, right? Where if something becomes popular thematically, people just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And ETH sort of seems like the next target right now. So I understand what he's talking about, where you're seeing like a lot of, bad quality projects, a lot of grifts, a lot of scams. But that's also how it tends to be in the beginning, right? Whenever you find like a new use case for anything. And naturally, like you'll get to a point where only the best sort of survive. But I think fundamentally it is bullish. Quantitatively, it can be bearish. So I'm gonna also switch the topic a little bit, maybe to DeFi now. Like one of the reasons why you've seen ETH perform the way it has, in my opinion, is because of this whole concept of like restaking or just locked tokens in general, right? And I think towards last summer, right, a lot of that has come online. Especially in Q1 or Q2 of this year as well. You had like Manta, Res, and whatever. And it means that ETH has not really had the same opportunity to sell off in the same vein that other coins or even Bitcoin have had. And so, there was a lot of talk back in the day about like the existential risk to the ETH ETF being, the grayscale outflows and whatnot. But in my opinion, it was always the crypto native ownership that actually represented the biggest risk, right? A significant amount of legacy ETH are still being held as BTC beta or used as collateral to create more sort of, on-chain liquidity and deposits. And that's the issue. These people have not really had the chance to sell yet. It just keeps adding more and more and more supply. So quantitatively, DeFi is kind of shit for ETH. But from a fundamental point of view, I think it's probably the best use case in crypto today, right? All these yield products, this is what makes the market, more attractive for perhaps TradFi participants, right? Because it is something that is not directional. It is something that can generate perhaps safer yields as like something like bonds and treasuries become more popular. You have staking, which, provides even better returns, even if you're using like stable coins. You don't even have to punt ETH for that.
I think what it comes down to is the store of value debate. And we will have Kyle Samani on in a few weeks. And I've been a thorn in his side for years because I've been disagreeing with his thesis that, just the best technology will be a store of value. I think that he doesn't understand this game at all. Vitalik has posted now saying that he has 90% of his net worth in ETH. He says, if I did not believe in ETH as a SOV, I would not hold 90% in it. So he's trying to publicly now be a bit more forceful in his support. But, you guys are laughing. I'm not sure why. I want to understand why. What I've always said about ETH is it's not a good macro asset. It's not like Bitcoin. It doesn't have that geopolitical importance. Yeah. And what I've called it is community money. And when the community is strong, it's great because, we're all kind of like using this common meme. Like you said, Huss, we use it for all the trading pairs on Uniswap are usually like ETH denominated. You'll have like layer 0 ETH or whatever. And you're using it for buying NFTs, gas, whatever. It becomes this activity community money. But when the community is weak and it gets weaker, it kind of feeds on itself where the reflexivity goes downwards, right? So why are you guys laughing?
Well, I'm laughing because it's not, some bullish sentiment that a founder of something has most of their net worth in the thing they founded. I mean, if you look at any company, project, etc., that's generally the case. Vitalik has at least over $1 billion of ETH, probably much more, but obviously impossible to say. And so for me, I just don't think it's that impressive that he holds 90% of his net worth in Ethereum. I don't think it speaks highly or negatively of him. I just don't think it's really that relevant or that shocking.
Yeah.
To me, it represents future supply, man.
Exactly.
And I guess, like, the fact that Vitalik is tweeting more about ETH, the asset, kind of signals how desperate the community has been. It's like, hey, Vitalik, like, do
That's exactly
something.
it.
Right. It's like, do something, Vitalik.
It looks like in desperation. Yeah.
And I want to pull up this Huss tweet, Justin. But Huss says that hope is not an investment thesis. We love or hate the industry, but that shouldn't really inform our trades and be objective. And I think, to the topic of capitulation, I don't think we've seen ETH capitulation. I mean, case like Justin, me, Jordy, we still hold a bunch of ETH. I think capitulation is like when Justin and I sell ETH or something.
No, I mean, I think the three of us are, I don't want to say we're different, right? Like everyone's sort of the same in some ways, but I don't think, I've said before, there's really no situation where I completely capitulate unless the project is actually abandoned at this point. So I don't think I'm a factor in that. I don't know, Jordy, would you ever capitulate everything? All your ETH holdings?
No, I have a long-term bag of meth. The meth bag is not touched. But I did say like 3-4 months ago that at this point I had lost belief in the ETH BTC ratio turning anytime soon, given how some things had played out, including the ETF as well, not being in the future. It's always nicer when something is a hope. It's this thing that can happen and then you can look forward to. And on the roadmap right now, the most bullish thing is the interoperability solving at some point of Ethereum. That's the main thing that we're looking forward to. But, this week, I would say has been on a personal level a development for me. I saw Vitalik starting to give these responses. I invited him very publicly to come on Steady Lads, and we got a ton of people retweeting and, +1, +100, like, do it. We really need this conversation. I feel like as an ETH community, and like you said, we're long-term bag holders here, we need to have certain questions, and we don't just want to watch the ivory tower, cookie cutter stuff that gets said. And the only response I got was from Justin Drake, who sent me a DM saying, "Hey, there's a Reddit AMA. If you want to send a written question, the Ethereum Foundation can respond in a Reddit AMA," which is maybe not exactly what we were going for.
Joking with some friends that Vitalik is like the new Kamala Harris, like only goes and takes friendly interviews with Bankless, right? Like a Bankless interview is great. Like he should do more of those. Bankless is awesome. It's been an amazing resource, but that's not going to challenge him. That's not going to fundamentally bring a new perspective to new people, right? Like that is already the same cohort of users that are sold on ETH and sold on the vision. But Vitalik coming on a show like ours, we'll obviously be fair. I very much respect him. He's one of my favorite people in the space, but we are willing to ask the hard questions, right? And bring a new audience to, his belief system. And I think that's much more valuable than Bankless. So hopefully he'll come on the show.
Yeah. I'm not sure that the chances are very high, given that we still haven't heard anything. I'm starting to get over the fact, because a lot of people have rightly pointed out, you have the founder is not really, at this point, the champion of the decentralized space. It's sort of happening by itself at this point. If people want DeFi, they'll get DeFi. It's not going to be determined by any single person. And the frustration seems to be more that, I know what you think about this, Huss, but a friend sent me a message that said, people just want to be on the winning team, and there's been too many failures with ultrasound money and roll-up issues and this kind of,
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's like people just look at price going down and they try to grasp at any straw they can to sort of justify why that's the case, right? Instead of maybe looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, "Hey, I put my money in a piece of shit asset or something," right? And so, it's because Vitalik is tweeting this or that. Not really, there's more factors at play. What really concerns me, so just going back to what Justin was saying earlier, I think spot holders typically in crypto tend to be very stubborn. They're not really people that really sell much, even when they're in profit, and especially when they're at a loss. So I'm not really concerned as much about like spot holders. What really concerns me when I look at a chart like ETH are sort of two things. The first is how sort of leverage heavy crypto is in general. So you have a lot of funds that obviously use leverage, and if it's not funds, then you also have like a bunch of DeFi loans and collateral that still can get liquidated. There's a lot of data that shows that I think a lot of those liquidations happen below 2,000, like around 1,700-ish. And that probably is where you start to see capitulation truly happen. People who sell just against their will, right? And I don't think we've really seen a ton of that. We've seen some of it from like 2,500 to 2,000, but below that I think is really where it gets gnarly. But also kind of what ETH needs if you want it to become like a softer asset instead of how heavy it's been trading. The other thing that concerns me is also mandates, right? So a lot of funds have to operate with mandates. If, for example, it is a fund that has like certain cash mandates, certain risk mandates, a chart like ETH is pretty concerning and also will result in them selling against their will. And you probably saw that happen with someone like Jump a while ago, right? Like I have no doubt that they probably sold a lot of their ETH because of some of their risk mandates and, because they're trying to come up with like a new team, hiring a bunch of new people. But, that's the real concerning part. It's people who are selling against their will. And in a market that is as liquid as crypto, that can be
I'm not
enough
sure
to
I
do
buy
something down,
the jump against their will thing. They definitely don't need to sell. They can.
Well, it depends on their mandates.
afford it.
It all depends on their mandates, right?
They're a private company, so it's just like two founders kind of prop capital, and their crypto exposure is in the many, many billions. So I don't think that they
Why do you think they? Because it seems like a pretty shitty price to sell, in my opinion, right? So why did they seem pretty desperate to just get all of that ETH off at once?
I'm not sure. There was definitely some thoughts that it might be them. Initially people thought they might be exiting, or maybe some settlement was forcing them to do it, but they seem to be still holding their massive positions in Solana.
Just on this topic, I wanted to ask you guys, I mean, the ETF was all we talked about for several months, and now it seems largely irrelevant. Like, do you guys think this is just no one wants to buy while Grayscale is still selling, even though those sales have trickled down basically to nothing? Like, what do you guys think is happening here? Is there just no institutional demand for ETH, or do we just have to wait longer? And you can see inflows in BlackRock were zero for the past several days.
I spoke about this a while ago, but when the ETH ETF was still an idea, like when I would speak to many fund managers, I just didn't really see any palpable interest from them, right? And the only people that seemed to talk about the ETH ETF being a big thing were like crypto native participants. And crypto native participants have no reason to buy an ETF, right? They can already buy ETH on exchanges and whatnot. So they were always, I think, overstating the impact of this ETF. For most TradFi participants, you already have the BTC ETF, which kind of does what the ETH ETF already does, but better. It's more liquid. They've already allocated to it. And then the other thing is you have this big giant elephant in the room with NVIDIA, right? Like, why would anyone trade ETH when you have all these different tech stocks that perform even better? And so when I ever talk to like fund managers, I just never found any interest for the ETH ETF personally.
There was a take like around March when we thought it was going to be rejected, which in hindsight seems correct. And it said that it's actually a good thing if ETH ETF comes in 2025, because actually like all the TradFi needs some time to digest Bitcoin. Like they really, let them get the first one, try it, see that it does well, it's successful, give them some time. And then when the next one comes a year later, they want to rerun the playbook. And it just came too soon, I think, ultimately.
I agree. And it just came at a time when there was too many big things on the table that people just didn't care, in my opinion. It also came during the summer where a lot of fund managers happened to be on vacation. I think if you really want to assess the ETH ETF, wait until after September when a lot of people get back, on their desks. But yeah, I think it just came too early. And the other thing is like, the Bitcoin ETF came at sort of a boring time in the market. So it was the golden child at the point, whereas now it's like people are more concerned about macro, people are more concerned about other assets. It also came during the time where like the Japan carry trade became relevant. So nobody really was talking about the ETH ETF, or nobody really cared about it.
I think the one good thing is that there is some NFT activity, and actually a former and possibly future president has put out Trump cards in ETH, and apparently his wallet, which I found his wallet has several million in ETH now. Obviously, like mixed opinions about an NFT collection by president, which seems to be a bit of a Ponzi thing. But look, if he wins and he's the guy who holds ETH, that has to be positive.
This tweet is hilarious, though. We just need to appreciate this for a second. A day after Trump dropped another NFT collection, OpenSea received a Wells notice from the SEC. Trump killed NFTs. I'm sure OpenSea received the Wells notice before, but it is hilarious timing that like Trump are selling these NFTs that presumably the SEC also deems as securities.
So cool. Like he's making physical versions. He's cutting his suit up and putting like little pieces of his suit.
Are you a proud holder?
What really? No. But look, I mean, Trump is a grifter, always has been, right? But he knows how to play the game well. What I think is really relevant is the people that he's actually getting in charge of crypto. So I don't know if you guys saw, but Howard Lutnick, from Cantor, is now heading up the team, and I think he's going to be great. You also have JD Vance, who is pretty experienced, I would say, in crypto. So it's really the people that he's bringing that I think is more relevant. But Trump himself, like I know the guy personally. He doesn't really know much about crypto, nor does he understand it. Right? He hears like a bunch of things from his kids, a bunch of his cabinet members, but to him, it's just about
that is a huge step forward compared to Gary Gensler.
Oh, absolutely.
That is so
absolutely, and it's all about capturing a new demographic. So you talked about the ETH ETF getting rejected back in March, and I'll give you guys, I guess, some insider information, but it was supposed to be rejected, right? The SEC had like a crazy case up against them. They were serving all these notices to the ETH Foundation, but then the Biden admin sort of was pressured when they saw that Trump was capturing all of these young voters by embracing crypto. And this was sort of a last hurrah from them. So they went and they pressured the SEC to do an emergency approval, to just reverse their entire stance, throw all the lawsuits that they had in the trash, right? Now, Kamala has different opinions when it comes to crypto than Biden. Biden at that point is very desperate. Kamala now realizes, you know what, they've already lost this demographic, so might as well appeal to perhaps the financial institutions and the banks who are against crypto. So now they've pivoted back to their old views, right? And so, yeah, you have a pretty interesting scenario right now where elections can become either bearish or bullish depending on who has the better chances of winning. So some people are treating Bitcoin as sort of a proxy for Trump's election chances, right? If his chances go up, Bitcoin tends to go up. If Kamala's more likely to win, Bitcoin tends to go down, So it has become quite interesting, in my opinion.
They call me the crypto president. I don't know if that's true or not, but a lot of people are saying that.
Are you holding Bitcoin? Are you holding any ETH? Are you on the boat with us, Huss, or are you just laughing at us?
Long term. So I do two things in crypto. So I have I have spot holdings that I have not really touched for almost 10 years, mainly in Bitcoin and ETH, like almost 70% Bitcoin, 30%
Congratulations.
ETH. I don't really touch these, but the way I sort of hedge them is by trading. And I have a few different methods in terms of how I trade crypto. I have like a few delta neutral strategies. I sell volatility, I sell options as well. But my trade style, if you've noticed, like through my Twitter, is mostly counter trading and mean reversion. So again, what I tend to notice is that lower time frames tend to counter trend a lot, whereas higher time frames tend to trend. And so if you imagine it like this, you have a long-term bag that you're just holding throughout higher time frames, that tends to go up. And then you have, shorter term trading that tends to counter that. It acts as a hedge in a way, right? So that's kind of how I manage my trades. It's been working out.
On the way up, there's going to be people that are selling some of their gains because they're too concentrated. So you get that mean reversion, and then on the way down, once something pukes, it'll sort of find a bit of a more natural base. So I agree with you, and that's something I've been doing. Yeah.
And the other thing with crypto is also like it is very algorithm dominated, right? Algorithms tend to trade according to statistics, right? That's why mean reversion is very common. That's why all these stat arb algos trade like this. And so in a market, you can imagine that's 24/7, that's extremely illiquid. There's actually not a ton of discretionary trading intraday. Especially you saw this during the summer. If you pull up like the Bitcoin chart over the last 2 to 3 months, you'll notice this looks very weird. Like it looks very sort of orderly in a way, right? Price tends to range, compress, expand. It's very algorithmic activity because it almost is purely algorithmic. And, for that reason, it tends to trade very, very differently in lower time frames. Like people don't really like to admit this, but your types of participants very much depend on your time frames, especially in crypto.
Yeah, and I guess I've also noticed that crypto tends to go up in a very short period of time, but like violently, and then
Yeah.
Then there's
Yeah.
like a month or 2 months of like just kind of drifting lower and sideways. If you pull up my screen, Justin, I think Huss 2 months ago posted this chart, and he's always felt like we were going to go down. I guess like was this always your view? And I guess like what's your outlook for the market? I guess into year end now that some or most of this has already played out.
Yeah, so this was based on sort of one thing, and it kind of works well for me every cycle because crypto tends to have the same amount of money going in and going out, right? Like people don't want to talk about this much, but this whole ETF narrative was driven by leverage. Again, it wasn't actually the ETF buyers themselves, right? It's just another narrative, just like all the other cycles we've had. And typically you reach a point where the money just sort of runs out, right? You can think of it as like a fixed supply of cash in this market until you have really, really significant players entering, which I have not seen yet. And so the way it generally works is you have a narrative, you have all this money going in, and then it just stalls. And when this stalls, you notice this like ranging behavior that we currently are seeing. And then it usually resolves by going down. Like if you notice in every bull cycle, you typically have like a few months of ranging, and then it rugs, and then it consolidates for a little bit, and then it does another leg up, right? And so that's sort of been my expectation, just based on the fact that the fundamentals that we've been trading have sort of already precipitated. They finished. The money supply, the cash supply has already been allocated. And so that's why it's sort of been my opinion that like we hit like 70K-ish, and then we go back down, consolidate for a little bit. I don't know if 50K was like enough of a positioning reset, in my opinion. And I also don't think we spent like enough time at low prices to break people's spirits, because you need to get to a point mid-cycle where people think it's a scam. That's just always how it goes. And then maybe the other half thinks, no, you know what? This is just a good bargain right now. We're still in a bull cycle. I don't think we've seen that yet. So I don't know what prices you might see it. I expected like 40K because, it's just, it seems like a pretty good fundamental level. It's where we were before this whole ETF narrative started. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we are due for like a pretty nasty positioning reset. And perhaps that might coincide with like the September seasonal weakness that you tend to see in TradFi.
So you think that we're going to just give back or Bitcoin's going to give back all its ETF gains? And I don't even know what that means for alts, right? Like that's just max pain.
Yeah, no, I think it's possible, right? And then you just wait for a little bit until a new narrative comes up, and then people start leveraging again, and we go back up. I think that this cycle is going to be pretty short-lived compared to other ones.
Let's see. I think the counterpoint would definitely be that we're at this point getting within the gravitational pull of November 4th as we get into Q3, deep Q3. We're just too close where all the attention is going to be on what are the polls saying, who's winning, and if Trump is doing okay, what are the assets, what's the trade, what's the Trump trade? And I think at this point, we kind of know that there's a lot of upside in crypto for the Trump trade narrative. So,
what makes it really tricky to trade, if you remember a while ago, there was like an opportunity when we were at 70,000. Everyone thought it was going to break out when Trump was talking and stuff. But it's just too early. And it's also like too close of a race to tell, in my opinion. I don't think fund managers are going to allocate to crypto yet because it's almost a 50-50 race, and that's just very risky. So the only sort of way I see it is if like Trump's win chances increase dramatically somehow before the elections, or if he just wins, right? It's going to be one of those sorts of times where the narrative doesn't really get front run, right? I think people might end up waiting for him to win, and then they start buying crypto. Or if, I don't know, something happens.
Well, the debate is imminent. I think it's in 2 weeks or so, and that debate is highly anticipated. I think will move.
I don't think it moves the needle much. I really don't. I personally don't. But
well, it doesn't have to move the needle much to move the results significantly, right? 50 to 49, and it really is all going to come down to Pennsylvania. Arizona and Nevada are going to go to Trump. Wisconsin and Michigan going to Harris, and then Pennsylvania is really
can you bring back can you find the Trump video again? Because he talks about his suit, and he says that the debate suit that he wore, he has a name for it.
And people are calling it the knockout suit. I don't know about that, but that's what they're calling it.
Like the knockout
suit, right? Yeah.
Maybe you'll get another knockout suit. I mean, kind of curious, like, how did you, learn about markets? Like, what is your alpha, so to speak? Like, how did you build your edge? And obviously you're a professional and TradFi as well. Like, how's your journey been?
Yeah, no, it's been a long and arduous journey. I would say that the one word I could use to describe it is pain. Pain is the best teacher. And for me, I started out trading crypto maybe in like 2016, 17-ish. So at that point, I finished studying. I had a triple major. I was in astrophysics, public policy, and economics. I specialized in behavioral economics, and that's what made crypto a very sort of special market to me because, you tended to see like all sorts of extremes and fear and greed. Decisions seemed very instinctual in this market, right? Very split second. And so that's why I tended to gravitate towards crypto over other markets. In the beginning, I started trading trends like everyone does in crypto because you see a market that goes up a lot, a market that goes down a lot. And so you think maybe the way to make generational wealth is by catching this trend. And then I realized that's easier said than done. And so after a lot of frustration, after a lot of losses, I decided to maybe review some of my methods and strategies. So I took a lot of time and I spent a lot of time just studying microstructure at this point. So I'd be spending like 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, looking at like the 5-second chart, having, the aggr notifications on.
That is a lot of hours, man. That is like full level autism. I've only heard of that with like, I don't know if you know, there's a poker player called Jungle Man. And he's like the notorious guy that just like solver comes out, he'll spend 20 hours a day just diving in. Sounds like that.
I mean, I am autistic, and that is maybe one of my edges in this market. But
so Huss, like obviously it's an interesting time in macro markets. We've had the Japan little earthquake and that's settled down, but stocks are already back at all-time highs, although it seems to be kind of, wobbling a bit more in tech side.
Yeah.
What do you make of everything going on the macro side?
Yeah. So I think like the big elephant in the room right now is obviously the upcoming cut in September. I personally think it's likely that they end up cutting 50 bips at the first meeting because 25 does nothing, in my opinion, is the same thing as not cutting. I think it goes 50, 50, and then 25. In terms of how markets react, this is where the game theory sort of comes in. It's all a matter of why they're cutting, right? So if they're cutting because the economy is weakened significantly, then a 50 basis point cut might actually signal panic and could be bearish. 25 is more conservative, which, barring any real bad data between now and the next meeting, is the current market pricing. The thing about this Fed, though, is that they do tell you what they're going to do. So, we mostly tend to ignore the market and just listen to Powell speak. And they literally will tell you what they're about to do.
Let's try to break down some of these things. So first of all, Justin has, I think, the Fed Watch here. We can look at the current probabilities of the 18th of September meeting. It's kind of split. I mean, it's pretty close. You don't usually see this late in the game. The Fed hasn't shown their hand, and it's a 60-40 almost, 63-36. So definitely your case of 50 bips still very much on the table. And then definitely it does look like a little bit like this Credit Suisse thing we had last year, where suddenly we had this huge panic, over-exaggerated moves, and then things settled down. And the only consistent thing is that in every crisis, Justin Sun will tweet saying that, he's going to either buy Credit Suisse or he's going to buy all the yen or just, give him all the Bitcoin.
Buy all the yen?
The one thing I look at the most for Bitcoin is also gold, and gold is quite happy with the amount of rate cuts coming and is obviously doing quite well. So my base case still is that the currency debasement is continuing unabated, and you don't want to be short assets.
Yeah, gold is a little unique because like the biggest counterparty there is central banks buying it up. I don't think central banks really trade or buy crypto, right? So it's a little different in my opinion. I get the fundamental comparison, but like as of last year or so, the participants in gold had changed drastically.
I think there's a ton of macro people that trade both at this point.
That's true.
Starting with the usual Tudors and Drunken Millers and then all these people. So we'll see a catch up trade if Bitcoin lags too much and gold is ripping. I think. Cool. Let's do a little pasta of the week. I think everybody's got a strong one here. There's been some very strong pastas I've seen. Taiki, you have a good one. You want to kick off?
Yeah, this kind of ties in well with the whole Vitalik conversation we had earlier. Justin, if you can pull it up. So if you can start from the beginning. So this is the ETH Foundation versus everyone else that's trying to make money holding ETH.
The ETH Foundation's got to eat first.
Yeah, they gotta eat first, like they're, you know, so aggressive.
No food for the rest of us, huh?
No gains for the rest of us. They're just gonna keep dumping on centralized exchanges, unfortunately.
It was a bit like disconnected from reality that they thought it would be a good idea to just send $100 million straight to Kraken without any explanation or anything. It's just like
they do not care, bro. They do not care.
And this is like a day after Vitalik tweeted ETH is good.
I put this tweet out that I thought was on topic and pretty important. Like, we love calling out the Ethereum Foundation, but Vitalik is controlling power. There's 3 people on the board of the EF. Vitalik is one of them, and there's one hired gun, like for regulatory purposes, just a guy that's like a paid board member. And then there's another woman alongside Vitalik. So it's really just the 2 of them, right, making these decisions, controlling the EF. Like, why are we calling out this EF, this misunderstood concept? We should just be talking to Vitalik and Aya directly and seeing like what they have to say and why there isn't more transparency. So hopefully more people start to inquire about this.
I think there's a pretty big topic that nobody's talked about yet. Vitalik apparently has a girlfriend now. I don't know if there could be anything more bearish for ETH.
Yeah, we've discussed on the show and speculated just a little bit on that one.
Yeah, it was an unfortunate development, but I'm happy for Vitalik though.
My pasta's a good follow on to Taiki's. So my co-founder tweeted that Ethereum Foundation has deposited 69,000 ETH to the Harris Waltz campaign just now with an Etherscan transaction, and you can see here that he actually got his first community note, which is like a very exciting milestone. And if you click the Etherscan link, it actually links to the DAO hack here. So apparently Joe was messaging me like a lot of people actually got tricked by this. Like some people fell for it, which is hilarious. So I don't know. Maybe EF is the biggest supporter of the Harris Waltz campaign. You never know.
And some like news websites like tweeted that saying that it's like real. So it kind of tells you like how no one does their research. They just see a tweet and they're like, oh my God.
Like, so what was that? What was that news publication that once had like the intern that published like the fake ETF news?
CoinDesk?
Yeah, Cointelegraph intern.
Oh, Cointelegraph.
Cointelegraph. Yeah. No, CoinDesk is pretty decent, I remember.
The fact that, they had to community note that means that it's believable enough, which is concerning, but yeah.
Well, it's not a far stretch, right? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Huss, what do you have for us?
So I posted the tweet from Sherlock Hodls, and he's one of my favorite accounts. I just thought this was funny.
This is supreme. This is an excellent banger here. Underappreciated, only 21,000 views, but this is referencing the famous MGNR tweets about holding no positions is the right position usually, and he's adapted it. He's saying in discretionary, the right position is almost always not Ethereum. The right action is almost always ignore Ethereum. 5 times a year, select any other coin on the floor, pick it up and do nothing. Outperformance.
Sad.
Excellent. 10 out of 10.
It's sad because Justin liked that tweet. You can see it. It's too real. How about you, Jordy? The last pasta.
So I have one that probably everyone's seen because it completely blew up, but I saw it first out of the lads. So this is excellent. As we said, Kyle Samani went on Bankless. Well-known Solana bull, spent an hour just chopping up, and the host couldn't really respond because everyone's a bit shell-shocked. So basically, we have a girlfriend here asking her, very Ethereum-looking boyfriend who's sitting down, "Are you sure you want me to make out with Solana guy?" And the cuck Ethereum guy says yes.
Just the numbers. Congrats to Icebergy.
Wait, let me find this. There's this tweet. I think it was like a sex worker that was talking about she had some client come to her and it was like he requested torture, but the way she tortured him was like just talking about ETH and asking about his ETH bag. Let me see if I can find it. It was like one of the funniest tweets. Hold up. I need to find this.
I love, by the way,
here it is.
Shout out to everyone that tags us in tweets saying this should be the pasta of the week. So shout out to Honesy, Jones, Hones, tagging Jordy, pasta of the week right here. Really helpful for us to find these things. It's great.
My friend is a dominatrix, and apparently one of her regulars is paying her to tell him buy ETH instead of cracking him with a whip. Y'all need to chill. ETH is not that painful of a hold. It's literally up over 200% from the bottom.
Wait, can you zoom in on the text, Justin? What does it say here?
Instead of hitting him with a whip or whatever, he would come into the dungeon and want me to tell him to buy Ethereum. We go to the next one. And then he would buy a little on his phone and act like it was painful.
Has to be the bottom. Come on. This has to be the bottom.
This sounds so ridiculous, but like I wouldn't be surprised if this is true, you know?
And this was that was posted on July 23rd when ETH was at 3.5K. So
oh no. Oh no.
Anyway, I think we've had another good therapy session, guys, and I've definitely, realized that the request for Vitalik to get involved is a little bit like childish. Like we should ultimately be adults and come to our own beliefs and conclusions, and even use the hive mind of all the like-minded people that like DeFi and are building on the space. And I'm looking forward to more crypto Twitter posts, and I'll try to post something myself on thoughts upon reflection. It does feel like it's quite good that finally this is all being said in public. So, Huss, thank you for joining us, and hopefully you'll get a bit more bullish. I'm seeing you get a lot of downswings correct. I mean, just as a final question, like, what do you think it will take for this 70K level to finally get broken out and getting into greener pasture?
I think you need a really, really strong narrative, or just like a positioning reset, in my opinion. Because, I mean, we've been consolidating in this range for almost 6 months. So there's a lot of people that have bought in the 6K region that are programmed to just sell above 70K, right? So you need to give them a reason not to do so, or you need to just liquidate them, right? And that's typically how it resolves in crypto. Maybe like some final words I could give to people as sort of advice in terms of how to trade this market, right? It's like, you just have to know when to follow the retards so they don't trample you, and then when to fade the retards because they're about to trip each other. That's literally the secret to trading crypto. It trades very differently than other markets. And that's typically why I tend to flip bullish when prices are low, and not like most participants when prices are high. That doesn't work. It's not a single name equity that you're trading, right? So just be patient. And cash is sort of the best asset that you can have in a market like crypto, because you'll get a lot of opportunities, whether it's narrative trades, whether it's lower prices. So just be patient, and when you get the opportunity to allocate, do so. That's my advice.
For all the DGens out there, be patient. That's probably a little bit good direction for everybody. Thanks for joining us, Huss, and Taiki, Justin. We'll continue our group therapy next week with everybody. Take care.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.